The secret Scotland Yard hid. Chapter 4. It was on a bleak November morning, the kind where the fog coils around London's streets like a shroud, that the case which would come to haunt both Holmes and myself first entered our lives. The fire at 221B Baker Street crackled as I perused the day's newspaper, sipping my tea with the contentment of a man who had, for the time being, no urgent duties. Holmes, on the other hand, was stretched languidly upon the settee, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed upon the ceiling with the intense abstraction that signalled the workings of his extraordinary mind. His reverie was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. A moment later, Mrs. Hudson entered, her usual composure tinged with a trace of alarm. "A messenger from Scotland Yard, Mr. Holmes," she announced. "Inspector Lestrade himself requests your presence, immediately." Holmes sat up with alacrity. "Ah, Watson," he said, springing to his feet, "it seems our peaceful morning is at an end. Lestrade does not summon me unless the situation is both urgent and perplexing." Curious, I folded my newspaper and followed him downstairs. Outside, the hansom cab that had delivered the message awaited. Within moments we were rattling through the streets of London toward our destination. Lestrade was waiting for us at the scene, his usually sharp features clouded with consternation. "Holmes, thank God you're here. We've got a case that defies all logic. I don't mind saying I've never seen anything like it in my life." "Indeed?" Holmes replied, with that peculiar light in his eyes that I had come to recognize as the herald of an intellectual challenge. "Then by all means, enlighten us." Lestrade gestured towards the building before us. "A member of Parliament, Sir Alfred Wetherell, was murdered in his office last night. The door was locked from the inside. The window was fastened, the only key was in his pocket, and there is not a single sign of forced entry." Holmes glanced up at the stately structure, its solemn facade betraying nothing of the horror that lay within. "And the cause of death?" "A bullet wound, straight to the heart." Lestrade exhaled, shaking his head. "Yet, here's the part that makes no sense, Holmes. There's no gun, no firearm in the room, nor anywhere in the building. It has vanished." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "You mean to say he was shot, but the weapon is gone?" "Exactly." Lestrade nodded grimly. "The constables searched every inch of the room. Not a trace. No powder burns, no sign of anyone escaping. It's as if the gun never existed." Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile. "Ah, a locked-room mystery of the highest order. Fascinating." We were led into Sir Alfred Wetherell's office, a grand chamber lined with bookshelves and dark mahogany furniture. The victim lay slumped in his chair, his lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Holmes moved swiftly, crouching beside the body, his gaze sharp as he absorbed every detail. "The wound is precise," he murmured. "Instantaneous death. Yet you are certain, Lestrade, that no weapon was found?" "None." Holmes stood, his keen eyes sweeping the room. His fingers brushed the edge of the desk, tracing the fine layer of dust. He moved to the window, inspecting the latch, then turned his attention to the heavy carpet. His examination was methodical, yet I could tell from the way he tapped a finger against his temple that something was already forming in his mind. "The only key was in his pocket, you say?" Holmes asked finally. Lestrade nodded. "Locked from The inside. Holmes turned suddenly. Then how did the murderer leave? A silence followed. It was the very question that had confounded us all. Lestrade hesitated. We don't know. That's why I sent for you. Holmes stepped back, surveying the room once more, his expression unreadable. Watson, what do you see? I started, unprepared for the question. I see a man who was alone in his office, shot through the heart, with no apparent means for the murderer to escape. Holmes's smile deepened. Precisely. And therein lies the paradox. A man is murdered in a sealed room, with no weapon, no entry, and no exit. Either the laws of physics have been momentarily suspended, or there is something we have not yet observed. I glanced at Lestrade, who looked just as confounded as I felt. Holmes, do you already have a theory? Holmes did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, retrieved his magnifying glass, and bent low over the edge of the desk. A moment later, he straightened with an air of quiet satisfaction. "There is something here, Watson," he said softly. "Something very peculiar indeed." "What is it?" I asked eagerly. Holmes only gave a small, enigmatic smile. "Not yet, my dear Watson, not yet. We must confirm a few things first. But mark my words, this crime is far from what it appears to be." And with that, he turned sharply on his heel, already deep in thought, while the mystery of Sir Alfred Wetherell's impossible murder loomed over us like a spectre, yet to be revealed. Chapter 2. The morning fog had begun to lift by the time we returned to 221B Baker Street. But the mystery we carried with us from Sir Alfred Wetherell's office remained as dense as ever. Holmes had been silent for the duration of our cab ride, his long fingers drumming rhythmically against the edge of his knee. It was a familiar sight. His mind, an intricate machine of deduction, processing details faster than any of us could hope to grasp. He, however, could not remain as patient. "Holmes, you cannot expect me to sit in silence while you have clearly noticed something at the crime scene. What did you find?" Holmes, still gazing out of the window, gave a small, knowing smile. "Patience, Watson. I prefer to collect all my pieces before attempting to assemble the puzzle. At present, I have only fragments. We must wait." We had scarcely stepped into our sitting room before the bell rang once more. Mrs. Hudson, with an exasperated sigh, appeared at the doorway. "Another visitor for you, Mr. Holmes," she announced. "A rather distressed gentleman, insisting that it is urgent." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his interest piqued. "Show him in, Mrs. Hudson." A moment later, a man entered, a middle-aged figure with a gaunt, nervous expression. He was clad in a fine, though slightly dishevelled suit. His face bore the marks of deep worry, his lips pressed together as if struggling to keep some great burden from spilling out. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes." His voice was strained, hoarse, as though he had not slept in days. Holmes motioned for him to sit. "You are troubled, sir. Speak freely." The man hesitated, glancing between us, then exhaled sharply. "My name is Henry Redford. He swallowed. "I was an associate of Sir Alfred Wetherell, and I believe I am in grave danger." I sat forward. "Danger, Mr. Redford?" He nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of his chair. "I was one of the last people to see Sir Alfred alive. We had a meeting at his office late last evening, before he was found dead." Holmes's eyes sharpened. What was the nature of this meeting? Redford hesitated, then lowered his voice. He wished to discuss a matter of some sensitivity. Sir Alfred had discovered irregularities within certain governmental dealings. He was deeply troubled by them and feared he had uncovered something dangerous, something that powerful individuals did not wish to come to light. Holmes exchanged a glance with me. And did he name these individuals? Redford shook his head. No, he said it was too early to speak openly, but he was certain someone was watching him. He feared he was being followed. A chill ran through me. And yet, you did not report this to Scotland Yard. The man scoffed bitterly. Scotland Yard? He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. Sir Alfred did report his concerns to a high-ranking official at Scotland Yard itself, and within a day he was dead. A silence fell over the room. I could feel the weight of Redford's words settling upon us like an oppressive cloud. Holmes, however, merely folded his hands. And you, Mr. Redford, why do you believe you are in danger? Redford wet his lips, his fingers twitching against his knee. Because Sir Alfred left me something. A document, a piece of evidence. He slipped it into my coat pocket before we parted, ways last night. I didn't realize it until I returned home. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded sheet of paper. This, he whispered, is why I will be dead before the week is over. Holmes took the paper, unfolding it with the utmost care. His eyes flicked across the contents, and I watched as his expression, normally unreadable, darkened slightly. Okudio held the page to the light, scanning the ink with a keen eye, before lowering it once more. Curious, he murmured. What is it, Holmes? I leaned forward. Holmes turned the paper so that we might see. It was a letter, half-written, abruptly cut off. The ink was smudged in places, as though it had been gripped by an unsteady hand, but the words that were legible sent a chill down my spine. I have found undeniable proof. It is deeper than I feared, and I suspect my every move is being watched. If something happens to me, let it be known that... The sentence ended there. The rest of the page was blank. Redford exhaled sharply. He never finished it, and now he is dead. Holmes studied the letter in silence, his fingers tapping lightly against the paper. Tell me, Mr. Redford, he said at last, has anyone else seen this letter? No one. Redford swallowed. Not yet. Holmes folded the letter neatly, slipping it into his own coat pocket. Then I suggest you do not leave Baker Street for the time being. Redford's eyes widened. You believe I am in immediate danger? Holmes steepled his fingers. I believe, Mr. Redford, that you are being watched. A knock at the door interrupted the moment, making us all start. Mrs. Hudson entered again, this time with a furrowed brow. Another visitor, Mr. Holmes, she said, hesitantly. Though I dare say you may not be pleased to see him. Holmes arched a brow. And why is that? Because he is from Scotland Yard, she answered, and he does not look pleased. Lestrade entered before she could finish speaking. His coat, still damp from the street outside, his eyes flicked from Holmes to Redford with something dangerously close to suspicion. Holmes, he said, his voice sharp, I need a word. Privately. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingers still resting upon the letter in his pocket. "Ah, Lestrade," he said smoothly. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" Lestrade's expression hardened. "Because someone at Scotland Yard thinks you already know too much." And with those words, I realized that we had stepped into a case far larger and far more treacherous than we had first imagined. Chapter 3. Lestrade's words hung in the air like a blade suspended above our heads. "Someone at Scotland Yard thinks you already know too much." I stole a glance at Holmes, expecting to see a flicker of surprise, but there was none. Instead, he remained utterly composed, his fingers still steepled, his expression betraying nothing but quiet calculation. Holmes gestured to a chair. "Do sit, Lestrade. You look as though you've just wrestled a ghost." Lestrade did not take the invitation. His gaze shifted to Henry Redford, who sat stiffly, his knuckles white against the armrest of his chair. "I see you've been entertaining guests, Holmes." Holmes gave a small smile. "Indeed, Mr. Redford arrived with concerns of his own. It seems his late associate, Sir Alfred Wetherell, had reason to believe his life was in danger. A belief, I might add, that was evidently well-founded." Lestrade's jaw tightened. "I came here because I need to know exactly what you've uncovered, Holmes, and I suggest you don't play games with me this time." Holmes exhaled through, his nose rising to his feet. "Very well, Lestrade. If it is information you seek, let us return to the scene of the crime." Lestrade frowned. "What for? We've searched every inch of that office." Holmes's eyes gleamed, and yet I suspect something has been missed. The hansom cab ride to Westminster felt longer than it was. Lestrade, seated beside me, kept casting furtive glances in Holmes's direction. The detective, for his part, said little, his fingers lightly drumming against his knee in that familiar rhythm of deep thought. Upon arrival at Sir Alfred Wetherell's office, a constable met us at the door. "Inspector, sir," he said, looking uneasy. "We weren't expecting anyone else to." Lestrade waved a dismissive hand. "Mr. Holmes is here on my orders. Stand aside." We stepped inside, the air thick with the lingering scent of tobacco and aged paper. The room was precisely as we had left it. Sir Alfred's lifeless form had been removed, but the desk remained undisturbed, the chair still slightly askew from where he had slumped. The window was latched, the bookshelves untouched. A locked room, a vanished gun, a man dead without explanation. Holmes moved immediately, his gaze sweeping the chamber with sharp efficiency. He walked the perimeter of the room, his fingers trailing along the wooden panels. He crouched beside the window, then ran a gloved hand across the carpet. "Watson, the lamp, if you please." I lifted the oil lamp from the desk and angled it, as he directed. The flickering light illuminated a small portion of the floor where Holmes had been focused. "There," he murmured. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing, only the well-worn fibres of the carpet. But then something, a faint impression upon the rug, just beside the chair, a shape that did not belong. Holmes retrieved his magnifying glass, bending low. A small, satisfied sound escaped him. "Fascinating." Lestrade frowned. "What is it?" Holmes straightened, dusting off his coat. "An answer, Lestrade, or at the very least the shadow of one." He gestured toward the floor. "Tell me, Inspector, what do you see?" Lestrade squinted. The carpet? Holmes sighed. Yes, Lestrade, the carpet. But observe more closely. There is a faint imprint here, an indentation, as though something heavy once rested in this precise spot. Something that is no longer here. I leaned forward, realization dawning. A safe. Holmes nodded. Precisely, Watson. Lestrade looked sceptical. A safe? But there's no safe in this office. Holmes turned to the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines of the old volumes. Not any more, he murmured. Someone removed it. Lestrade scoffed. Now see here, Holmes. Do you mean to tell me that in the short time between Sir Alfred's death and our arrival, someone walked into this locked room, removed an entire safe, and vanished into thin air? Holmes smiled. That would be absurd. No, Lestrade, I believe. The safe was removed before Sir Alfred's murder. Lestrade folded his arms. And what makes you so certain? Holmes pointed to the dust. There is a clear outline where the safe once stood, but no fresh disturbance in the dust surrounding it. Had it been removed after the murder, we would see fresh tracks. Instead, the dust has settled evenly. I felt a chill creep along my spine. Then Sir Alfred's killer wasn't after him. I turned to Holmes. They were after whatever was inside that safe. Holmes's expression darkened. And it is that very absence, Watson, that tells us the most. Holmes turned abruptly toward the door. Come, gentlemen. Our next destination awaits. Lestrade, still looking baffled, followed after him. And where, pray tell, are we going? Holmes threw on his coat. To a place where secrets are stored, where power is hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy. We must speak to those who would... Rather, we did not. Lestrade paled. You mean... Holmes smirked. Yes, Lestrade, we are going to Scotland Yard. And with that, we stepped out into the London night, the weight of a hidden conspiracy pressing upon us like the fog rolling in from the Thames. Chapter 4. The chill of the London evening bit through my coat as we made our way toward Scotland Yard. Holmes had not spoken a word since we left Sir Alfred Wetherell's office, and I had long since learned that his silences were not to be interrupted. He walked with a determined pace, his gaze fixed ahead, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his overcoat. Lestrade, on the other hand, was not as accustomed to Holmes's brooding moods. "You've dragged us out here on nothing more than a hunch, Holmes," he muttered, adjusting his collar against the cold. "If you think you're just going to waltz into Scotland Yard and demand answers, you've got another thing coming." Holmes stopped abruptly, turning on his heel to face Lestrade. "Tell me, Lestrade, do you believe in coincidences?" Lestrade blinked. "What? Coincidences, Inspector? Do you believe that Sir Alfred's locked-room murder, the missing safe, and Mr. Redford's warning are all matters of chance?" Lestrade shifted uncomfortably. "I don't believe in fairy tales, if that's what you mean." Holmes's lips twitched. "Then we are in agreement. Because I assure you, Lestrade, this is no fairy tale. It is a carefully orchestrated deception." He turned sharply and continued walking, leaving Lestrade fuming behind him. By the time we arrived at Scotland Yard, the streets had grown eerily quiet. The grand looming building stood before us, its stone facade appearing even more unwelcoming under the gaslights. Holmes wasted no time, striding toward the entrance as though he owned the place. A sergeant at the front desk looked up as we entered. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his tone cautious. "Inspector Lestrade?" His eyes flicked toward me, but settled back on Holmes. "What brings you here at this hour?" Holmes did not answer immediately. Instead, he removed his gloves one finger at a time, a deliberate act that seemed to unnerve the man. "We require access to Sir Alfred Wetherell's personal records," Holmes said finally. The sergeant's brow furrowed. "Sir Alfred Wetherell?" Holmes leaned forward slightly. Surely a man of his stature would have had dealings with Scotland Yard, his correspondences, reports, concerns, all of it. And yet I suspect that any such records will now be missing. Lestrade sighed. "Holmes, you can't just—" But the sergeant had already paled. His hesitation was telling. "There are no records," the sergeant said quickly. Too quickly. Holmes's smile did not reach his eyes. "Ah," he murmured, "how remarkably efficient of Scotland Yard." The tension in the room thickened. Lestrade, who had long since given up trying to restrain Holmes, rubbed his temples. "Listen here," the sergeant said, shifting uncomfortably. "If you've got questions, you'll need to speak to someone higher up." Holmes tilted his head. How convenient! And who, pray tell, would that be? The sergeant hesitated again, then leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Chief Inspector Harrington." Lestrade stiffened. "Harrington?" Holmes merely nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well then, let us not keep him waiting." We were led down a long corridor, the gaslights flickering dimly above us. The sergeant stopped before a heavy, wooden door and knocked once. A voice called from within, "Enter!" Chief Inspector Harrington was a man of formidable presence. His greying hair was neatly combed, his uniform crisp, and his sharp blue eyes flickered with quiet authority. He sat behind a large oak desk, a single oil lamp casting shadows against the walls. "Mr. Holmes." His tone was cool. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Holmes took his time removing his coat, draping it over the back of a chair, before settling into the seat across from Harrington. "We are investigating the murder of Sir Alfred Wetherell." Harrington exhaled. Through his nose. A tragic affair, to be sure. And what does that have to do with me? Holmes smiled. "You tell me." A silence stretched between them. Harrington's jaw tensed slightly, but he did not look away. "You are wasting your time," Harrington said finally. "Scotland Yard has already conducted its investigation. Sir Alfred's death was an unfortunate crime, but a straightforward one. There is no greater conspiracy." Holmes leaned forward. "Is that what you truly believe, Chief Inspector?" Harrington's fingers curled against the desk. "It is what I know." Holmes let out a soft hum of amusement. "And yet, how curious it is that Sir Alfred's personal records have vanished." A flicker of something crossed Harrington's face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "You overestimate your own importance, Holmes." Holmes tapped a finger against his chin. "Do I? Then tell me, Chief Inspector, where is the missing safe?" This time, the reaction was undeniable. Harrington's hand twitched, his eyes narrowing. It was a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Holmes smiled. Lestrade, who had been watching the exchange in growing confusion, finally snapped. "Enough of this! If you know something about Sir Alfred's death, you are obligated to share it." Harrington exhaled sharply. then rose from his chair. He walked to the window, gazing out into the night. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, measured. "There are things, gentlemen, that you do not understand, things that do not concern you." Holmes stood as well, adjusting his cuffs. "On the contrary, Chief Inspector, I believe they concern us very much." Harrington turned, his expression unreadable. "You are playing a dangerous game, Mr. Holmes." Holmes smiled. "Games are only dangerous if one does not know the rules." Another silence. Finally, Harrington sighed. "If I tell you what I know, you must forget you ever heard it." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "I never forget anything, Chief Inspector." Harrington hesitated, then muttered, "Then, for your own sake, you had best pretend that you do." I felt a chill settle in my good. Whatever lay at the heart of this case, it was something deeper than we had ever anticipated. Holmes merely straightened his coat. "Watson, Lestrade," he said smoothly, "I believe we have what we came for." And with that, we left Scotland Yard, stepping out into the cold London night, where, for the first time, I began to wonder if we had already ventured too far into the shadows. Chapter 5. We stepped out of Scotland Yard into the damp London night, the gas lamps flickering dimly against the dense fog. Lestrade muttered something under his breath, his features twisted in frustration. Holmes, however, remained eerily quiet, his sharp gaze distant, as though he were piecing together a puzzle only he could see. For a time, none of us spoke. I could still feel the weight of Chief Inspector Harrington's words pressing upon me. "You are playing a dangerous game, Mr. Holmes." It was clear now. We were trespassing into a matter far greater than the murder of a single man. And if the missing safe was any indication, someone had gone to great lengths to ensure Sir Alfred's secrets were buried with him. Lestrade exhaled sharply. "Holmes, I don't like this. I don't like it one bit. I've worked under Harrington for years, and I've never known him to lie." Holmes tilted his head slightly. "He did not lie, Lestrade." Lestrade frowned. "Then what do you call that performance back there?" Holmes smirked. "A masterful act of omission." Lestrade threw up his hands. "Blast it, Holmes! What are we even looking for now? The man's been murdered, his safe has vanished, and Scotland Yard itself is treating the whole affair like a bloody ghost story." Holmes turned, his sharp features illuminated briefly by the glow of a street lamp. "And does that not trouble you, Lestrade?" Lestrade hesitated. Holmes took a step closer. Sir Alfred was not merely murdered, he was silenced. His death was not an act of passion, nor the result of some petty crime. It was an execution, carried out by an individual or individuals who understood the weight of what he had uncovered. Felt a chill creep up my spine. "And you believe Harrington knows who was behind it?" Holmes sighed. "I believe he suspects. But a man in his position does not speak openly of such things, Watson, which is why we must proceed carefully." Lestrade let out a weary breath. "And where do you propose we start?" Holmes glanced at me. "With Mr. Redford." It was close to midnight when we arrived back at Baker Street. The moment we stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows against the walls. The curtains were drawn, as we had left them, but the air inside felt different, disturbed, and then I saw him. Henry Redford sat hunched in the armchair, his face pale, his hands gripping the edges of his coat as though he feared letting go would send him tumbling into oblivion. His eyes flickered toward us, wild and filled with something close to terror. "Mr. Redford," Holmes greeted, removing his gloves. "I see you have been waiting." Redford swallowed. I had nowhere else to go." Holmes settled into his chair, gesturing for me to pour a drink. I complied, handing Redford a glass of brandy, which he accepted with shaking fingers. Holmes leaned forward. "Tell me, Mr. Redford, why are you afraid?" Redford let out a shuddering breath. "Because I am being followed," Lestrade scoffed. "Followed? By whom?" Redford shook his head. "I don't know, but someone was outside my home tonight. A man, no, men, watching, waiting. I could feel it." Holmes tapped his fingers together. "And yet you came here?" Redford's eyes snapped to him. "Because I have no choice." His voice trembled. "Don't you understand, Mr. Holmes? Sir Alfred left me with something dangerous. And now, whoever killed him is coming for me next." The room fell silent. Holmes regarded Redford carefully. "You spoke of a document earlier, Mr. Redford. The letter Sir Alfred left you. But was there something else?" Redford hesitated. Holmes's voice turned softer, but no less commanding. "If you wish to leave this room alive, Mr. Redford, I suggest you tell me the truth." Redford let out a sharp exhale. His hand moved to his coat, retrieving something from the inner pocket. He hesitated for a moment, then placed it on the used table, a golden signet ring. It was unremarkable at first glance, save for the intricate engraving upon its surface, a symbol, two intertwining serpents, their fangs bared, coiled around a single eye. Lestrade frowned. "What in blazes is that?" Redford's voice dropped to a whisper. "The mark of the Veiled Order." Holmes's fingers stilled. Lestrade's brow furrowed. "The what?" Holmes leaned back, his expression unreadable. "A name whispered in darkened halls. An organization that does not exist. At least not in any official capacity. It is a society of men who operate behind the veil of power, influencing matters of state, economy, and justice itself. Their reach is vast, their methods efficient." I felt my breath hitch. "And you believe Sir Alfred discovered something about them?" Holmes studied the ring. "I believe, Watson, that he did more than discover. He threatened them." Redford swallowed. "Sir Alfred told me before his death that he had been contacted, warned to stop his investigation. He refused, and then, a week later, he was murdered." Lestrade rubbed his temples. "So what are you saying? That Scotland Yard is protecting these men?" Holmes's eyes darkened. "Not protecting, Lestrade. Fearing." The weight of his words settled upon us like a stone. Holmes lifted the ring, turning it between his fingers. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We are no longer searching for a mere murderer." He set the ring back down upon the table. "We are hunting ghosts." The clock struck 1 as I prepared to retire for the night. Holmes remained in his chair, the ring before him, lost in thought. I paused by the door. "Holmes, you're certain of this?" Holmes glanced up. "Watson, Certainty is a luxury we cannot afford. But what I do know is this. Sir Alfred Wetherell was not just a victim. He was a martyr. And his death was only the beginning. I swallowed. Then what do we do? Holmes's gaze flickered toward the window, where the faint glow of a street lamp cast long shadows against the walls. We wait, he murmured, because soon enough they will come to us. And in that moment I knew with absolute certainty we were no longer the hunters, we were the hunted. Chapter 6 awoke to the sound of hurried footsteps in the hall. The clock on my bedside table read 6:15. The early morning light barely filtered through the heavy London fog that clung to the city, and I had the distinct feeling that whatever had roused me was not of a peaceful nature. I hurriedly dressed and made my way toward the sitting-room, where Holmes stood by the window, already fully attired, his eyes fixed on the street below. His expression was unreadable, but there was a sharpness in his posture that told me something had changed. Lestrade was there as well, standing near the fireplace, his coat still damp from the morning mist. He looked uncharacteristically grave. "What is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse with sleep. Holmes did not turn from the window. "A second murder, Watson." I stiffened. "Who?" Holmes finally faced me, his grey eyes cold. "Henry Redford." The words struck me like a physical blow. "But that's impossible. He was here just last night." Lestrade exhaled sharply. "Found dead in his home early this morning. The landlady discovered the body when she went to bring him tea." I ran a hand through my hair. "How? Lestrade's?" Jaw tightened. "Shot. One bullet to the chest. No sign of forced entry. No witnesses." I turned to Holmes, hoping for an explanation, but he merely pressed his fingertips together, his mind already deep in calculation. Lestrade rubbed his forehead. "I don't like this, Holmes. First Sir Alfred, now Redford. If you ask me, whoever did this is tying up loose ends." Holmes's lips curled slightly. "Then we must ensure that we are not the next." Despite the early hour, a small crowd had gathered outside Redford's modest home in Kensington. Holmes, Lestrade, and I pushed through the murmuring onlookers and stepped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something else. Gunpowder. Redford's body lay slumped in a chair by the fireplace, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. A single bullet wound marred his chest, dark blood soaking through his waistcoat. His eyes were frozen in a final, silent scream. Holmes moved at once, his keen gaze sweeping the room. He crouched beside the body, his gloved fingers brushing against the edge of Redford's coat. Then he turned his attention to the fireplace, where the embers still smouldered faintly. Something had been burned, recently. Lestrade followed Holmes's gaze. "You think he tried to destroy something before he was killed?" Holmes didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the poker and sifted through the ashes. A small, charred fragment emerged. A corner of parchment, the ink mostly obliterated, but a single word remained legible. "Veiled." I felt my pulse quicken. The veiled order. Holmes nodded. It would seem our late Mr. Redford was in possession of more than just a signet ring. Lestrade exhaled sharply. If that document was important enough to kill for, then someone wanted it gone. Completely. Holmes straightened. Perhaps, or perhaps Redford's killer did not have time to ensure the job was thoroughly done. He gestured toward the bookshelf. "Watson, assist me." Together we searched the shelves, Holmes running his fingers along the spines of the books, testing for anything unusual. And then a click. Holmes withdrew a single volume, a hollowed-out book. Inside was a small envelope, yellowed with age. Lestrade leaned in. "Well, what is it?" Holmes opened the envelope carefully, his expression unreadable as he extracted a single sheet of paper. He read in silence before passing it to me. The words, though brief, sent a chill through me. "Alfred, you are right. The order exists. But it is not just politicians. They are everywhere, even within the yard. I have seen the proof myself. If I do not return, you must act. The key is with the serpent. Trust no one. There was no signature." Lestrade let out a slow breath. This means Sir Alfred wasn't acting alone. Holmes's fingers tapped against the envelope. More than that, Lestrade. It means that someone within Scotland Yard has already betrayed us. We left Redford's house an hour later, the weight of our discovery pressing upon us. The morning fog had not lifted. It clung to the city as if hiding something beneath its veil. Holmes walked with his hands behind his back, his gaze distant. I knew better than to interrupt his thoughts, so I waited. Finally, he spoke. "Watson, do you recall what Redford told us yesterday?" I frowned. "About the men following him." Holmes shook his head. "Before that, he said Sir Alfred had been warned, that someone contacted him before his death, urging him to stop." I nodded. "Yes, and he refused." Holmes's eyes gleamed, which means someone within the veiled order was not in agreement with Sir Alfred's murder. Lestrade frowned. "You're saying there's a traitor within the order?" Holmes smirked. "Or an ally?" A silence stretched between us. Holmes continued, his voice lower now. "The letter we found said the key is with the serpent. What do you make of that, Watson?" I hesitated. "The symbol on the ring, 2 serpents intertwined." Holmes nodded. "Precisely." He withdrew the ring from his pocket, holding it up to the light. "And yet, what if the serpent in question is not merely a symbol, but a person?" Lestrade's face darkened. "Someone who wears this ring." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "Indeed, and if that is the case, then the man we seek is someone we have already met." I felt my stomach twist. "Harrington!" Holmes smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Let us not be too hasty, Watson. There are many serpents slithering through the halls of power." Lestrade rubbed his temples. "And how do you suggest we find out which one is trying to help us, and which one wants us dead?" Holmes slipped the ring back into his pocket. "We set a trap." Lestrade exhaled sharply. "A trap? Holmes, these people aren't common criminals. They're dangerous." Holmes's smile deepened. "Then it is a good thing, Lestrade, that I never play fair." That night, I found myself unable to sleep. I sat in my chair by the fire, watching as Holmes prepared for whatever scheme he had devised. He was meticulous, arranging documents, adjusting the position of his violin, checking the lock on the door, subtle things, but telling. I cleared my throat. "Holmes, He did not look up. I hesitated. "Are you certain we can win this?" Holmes finally met my gaze. His expression was calm, but there was something beneath it, a flicker of something I rarely saw in him. "Doubt, Watson," he murmured. "The question is not whether we can win." He turned back to his work, his voice barely above a whisper. "The question is how much we are willing to lose." And with that, he continued his preparations, while I sat in silence, knowing that the storm we had walked into was only beginning. Chapter 7. The following evening, Holmes's preparations were complete. I watched as he moved about the sitting room, every gesture precise, every detail accounted for. It was the calm before the storm, and I had long since learned that these were the moments when Holmes was at his most dangerous. Lestrade sat stiffly in his chair, arms crossed. "Holmes, I hope you know what you're doing." Holmes smirked. "Come now, Lestrade. When have I ever given you cause for doubt?" Lestrade scoffed. "Would you like that list alphabetically or chronologically?" I cleared my throat. "Holmes, you have yet to explain the specifics of your plan." Holmes paused, then turned to face us. "Very well, gentlemen. Allow me to illuminate the matter." He retrieved the signet ring from his pocket, holding it up between his fingers. "This is our bait." Lestrade frowned. "The ring?" Holmes nodded. "The Veiled Order believes it has erased all traces of Sir Alfred Wetherell's investigation. They burned his documents, silenced Redford, and ensured that Scotland Yard remains ignorant or complicit. But what they do not know is that this ring still exists." Lestrade rubbed his chin. "And you believe someone will try to retrieve it?" Holmes's smile deepened. "I do not believe Lestrade. I know." I felt a chill settle over me. "You mean to lure them out?" Holmes inclined his head. "Precisely, by spreading a carefully constructed rumour." Lestrade leaned forward. "What kind of rumour?" Holmes twirled the ring between his fingers. "That a certain Mr. Henry Redford, before his tragic demise, left behind a final piece of evidence. Something tangible, something damning." Lestrade exhaled sharply. "You're painting a target on your back." Holmes merely shrugged. "Better mine than an innocence." I frowned. "And what, pray tell, happens when they come for you?" Holmes smiled, a dangerous, knowing smile. "Then, Watson, we shall have our answer." The trap was set. Holmes wasted no time in ensuring the rumour reached the right ears. He left anonymous notes in key locations, slipped into the pockets of certain yard officers, tucked into the pages of newspapers at select gentlemen's clubs. The message was simple. The Serpent's Key still exists, and it is in the hands of Sherlock Holmes. We did not have to wait long. It was just past midnight when the first sign of movement reached us. I was seated in my chair, my revolver resting within easy reach, when Holmes, who had been pretending to read, suddenly spoke. "Watson." I looked up. Holmes's gaze was fixed on the window. "Do not react suddenly, but we are being watched." My heart pounded. I resisted the urge to turn my head. "How do you know?" I murmured. Holmes's lips barely moved. "The gaslight flickered a moment ago. Someone is in the alley across the street." Lestrade, who had been pacing, stiffened. "Do you recognize them?" Holmes smirked. "Not yet, but we shall." There was a sudden, deliberate knock at the door. The three of us exchanged glances. Holmes stood. "Watson, remain seated. Lestrade, stay near the fireplace." I reached for my revolver, my fingers tightening around the grip. Holmes approached the door and, without hesitation, pulled it open. A man stood in the threshold. He was tall, dressed in a dark overcoat. The brim of his hat casting a shadow over his features, but even in the dim light I caught the glint of something in his eyes, something sharp, calculated. Holmes smiled. "Ah, I was expecting you." The man hesitated, then stepped inside. Lestrade straightened. "Who the devil is this?" Holmes closed the door, locking it behind him. "Allow me to introduce—" He gestured toward the stranger. "Mr. Adrian Graves." The name meant nothing to me, but Holmes's expression told me it should. Graves removed his hat, revealing a lean, angular face. He studied us each in turn, his movements slow, deliberate. Finally, his gaze settled on Holmes. "I assume you know why I am here," he said. Holmes's smile never wavered. "I do, but I would much prefer to hear you say it." Graves exhaled. "You have something that does not belong to you." Holmes tapped his fingers against his chin. "Ah, you must mean this." He withdrew the signet ring from his pocket and held it up to the light. Graves's expression remained impassive, but I saw the flicker of tension in his jaw. Holmes tilted his head. "I take it this ring is important to you." Graves's voice remained calm. "That depends. What price would you set for its return?" Holmes chuckled. "You assume I seek a price." Graves' lips curved slightly. "Then what do you seek?" Holmes leaned forward. "A name." For the first time, something in Graves' demeanour shifted. "A name?" Holmes nodded. "The man who ordered Sir Alfred Wetherell's murder." Silence. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. Graves' eyes flickered toward Lestrade, then me, before returning to Holmes. "I cannot give you that," he said at last. Holmes did not blink. "Cannot, or will not." Graves exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You do not understand what you are asking, Holmes. This goes beyond Wetherell, beyond Redford. This is not a single crime. It is a system." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then tell me, Mr. Graves, what role do you play in this system?" Graves hesitated. Then, softly, he said, "I am the man sent to kill you." Lestrade cursed, reaching for his pistol. But before he could move, Graves raised a hand. "No need for that, Inspector. If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Holmes smirked. "How very reassuring." Graves sighed. "I was sent here to recover the ring. But I will tell you this much, Holmes. You have until tomorrow night to drop this case. After that, you will not receive another courtesy visit." Holmes studied him. "And if I refuse?" Graves's smile was almost regretful. "Then, Mr. Holmes, you will not live to see the end of this mystery." Another silence stretched between us. Finally, Holmes pocketed the ring once more. "You may leave, Mr. Graves." Graves hesitated, but then, without another word, turned and strode to the door. As he reached the threshold, he paused. "For what it's worth, Holmes, I do not envy the path you have chosen." With that, he stepped out into the night, Disappearing into the fog, Lestrade exhaled. "Holmes, what in blazes just happened?" Holmes turned to us, his expression unreadable. "Watson, Lestrade." He let out a slow breath. "We have just been given a deadline." I swallowed hard. "And what do we do?" Holmes's lips curled into a grin. "We make our next move before they do." Chapter 8. The moment Adrian Graves vanished into the fog, I turned to Holmes. "That man just threatened your life, Holmes, and you're standing there smiling. Have you gone mad?" Holmes gave a small chuckle, tapping his fingers together. "On the contrary, Watson, for the first time since this case began, we are no longer chasing shadows. They have come to us." Lestrade, still gripping his pistol, exhaled sharply. "Holmes, that man wasn't bluffing. He gave you a deadline. Tomorrow night. What do you intend to do before then?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Why, Lestrade, I intend to solve the case, of course." I frowned. "And what if you're wrong? What if we're walking into a trap?" Holmes smirked. "Oh, Watson, I am counting on it." Holmes wasted no time. The next morning, before the city had fully awakened, we found ourselves in a hansom cab, rattling through the streets of London toward our destination. I turned to Holmes. "And where exactly are we going?" Holmes smiled cryptically. "To the home of the dead." Lestrade and I exchanged a glance. "You mean," Holmes nodded, "Sir Alfred Wetherell's estate. It was a stately residence in Kensington, its grand facade now darkened with the weight of death. A constable stood at the gate, but Lestrade waved him off, and we proceeded inside without question." Holmes moved quickly, his eyes sweeping over the corridors, his fingers tracing along the walls, as though searching for something unseen. "Watson," he murmured, "you recall the letter we found at Redford's house, the one that said, 'The key is with the serpent'?" I nodded. "Yes. You believe it refers to the symbol on the ring?" Holmes smiled faintly. "That is what they wanted us to believe." Lestrade folded his arms. "Then what does it really mean?" Holmes stopped before a grand oak desk in Sir Alfred's study. He ran his fingers along its edge, then reached beneath it. There was a soft click. A hidden compartment slid open. Lestrade let out a low whistle. "Clever devil." Holmes withdrew a single sealed letter, yellowed with age. He opened it carefully, scanning the contents. Then he exhaled sharply. "Ah!" I stepped forward. "What is it?" Holmes passed me the letter. As my eyes moved over the words, I felt my breath catch. "To those who come after me, if you are reading this, then I am dead. But know this, my murder was no ordinary crime. I have uncovered the truth about the Veiled Order, and they have chosen to silence me for it. But the true danger is not in the men who pull the strings. It is in the one who holds the knife. He is among you. He is watching. And he will not stop until the last thread is cut. Trust no one. The key is with the serpent. A.W. Silence fell between us. Lestrade muttered a curse under his breath. He knew they were coming for him. Holmes nodded. More than that, he knew who. I felt the weight of realization sink in. Holmes, you don't mean... Holmes met my gaze. Yes, Watson. Sir Alfred's murderer was not just a pawn of the Veiled Order. Lestrade's eyes widened. He was one of us. By nightfall, we were back at 201B Baker Street. Holmes sat calmly, his hands folded in his lap, waiting. "Holmes, are you certain of this?" I asked quietly. Holmes gave a small nod. "Quite." A sharp knock at the door echoed through the room. "Ah," Holmes murmured. "Right on time." Lestrade moved to open it, but Holmes raised a hand. Not yet. Instead, he stood and strode to the door himself, pulling it open with deliberate slowness. The figure standing in the doorway was none other than Chief Inspector Harrington. My blood ran cold. Harrington stepped inside, his expression carefully, controlled. "Mr. Holmes," he said smoothly, "I heard you've been making inquiries." Holmes smiled. "Indeed, Chief Inspector, and what impeccable timing you have." Lestrade's jaw tightened. "Harrington, what are you doing here?" Harrington's gaze flicked to the signet ring on the table. "I could ask you the same, Lestrade." Holmes chuckled. "Oh, come now, gentlemen. We need not dance around the inevitable." He stepped toward Harrington, lowering his voice. "You were the one who warned Sir Alfred, weren't you?" Harrington's eyes flashed. Holmes continued, his tone deceptively light. "You knew what he had uncovered. You told him to drop the case. But when he refused, when he threatened to expose the truth, you had no choice." Harrington's face remained unreadable. Lestrade's hand went to his revolver. "Harrington, is this true?" Holmes exhaled. "He won't answer you, Lestrade, because he knows that he is already caught." Harrington smirked. "And what proof do you have, Holmes?" Holmes's expression darkened. "You made one mistake, Chief Inspector. When Redford died, you were careful to destroy the letter. But what you failed to consider was that Redford hid another copy." He withdrew the letter from Sir Alfred's study and held it up. Harrington's face paled. Lestrade stepped forward. "Harrington, by order of Scotland Yard, you are under arrest." Harrington's lips curled into a sneer. "You think this ends with me?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "No, Chief Inspector. I think this is just the beginning." Harrington lunged, but Lestrade was faster. He grabbed Harrington's arm, forcing him against the wall. The struggle was brief. 2 constables burst through the door, dragging the Chief Inspector away. As the room settled into silence, I exhaled. "Holmes, do you think he was telling the truth?" Holmes's expression was unreadable. He was. Lestrade dusted off his coat. "Well, we got him. That's what matters." Holmes let out a quiet chuckle. "Oh, Lestrade, you truly believe we have won?" Lestrade frowned. "Harrington was the killer. That's case closed, isn't it?" Holmes turned to the window, staring into the darkened streets. "No, Lestrade, the veiled order still exists. Harrington was merely their knife." I swallowed. "Then who holds the blade?" Holmes remained silent for a long moment. Then, softly, he said, "That is a mystery for another night." And with that, he turned away from the window, his silhouette framed by the dim glow of the street lamp, while, somewhere in the city, unseen forces continued their game. One that was far from over. Chapter 9. The night was heavy with silence after Chief Inspector Harrington was taken away. Holmes remained at the window, watching as the constables led him down Baker Street. I could not shake the feeling that, despite the arrest, our work was far from finished. Lestrade let out a long breath. "Well, Holmes, you've done it again. Scotland Yard will have a hard time explaining how one of their own was behind this mess. But at least the case is solved." Holmes turned, his expression unreadable. "Is it, Lestrade?" Lestrade frowned. "What do you mean? Harrington killed Sir Alfred. He had access to the crime scene, the motive to silence him, and the connection to the veiled order. What more do you need?" Holmes picked up the signet ring from the table, turning it between his fingers. "A question, Lestrade. A single, lingering question." I leaned forward. "Which is?" Holmes's sharp gaze settled on me. "Why did they let us catch him?" Lestrade scoffed. "They didn't let us catch him, Holmes. You outplayed him." Holmes smirked. "Perhaps, but consider the facts. The Veiled Order is a secret society of immense power. It has operated from the shadows for decades, perhaps centuries. They have infiltrated the highest levels of government. And yet, we were able to expose Harrington with relative ease. Does that not strike you as odd?" A cold realization crept over me. "You think they wanted him to take the fall?" Holmes nodded. "Exactly. Harrington was a convenient sacrifice, a distraction. But the true power behind the Veiled Order remains untouched." Lestrade cursed under his breath. "So, you're saying the real mastermind is still out there?" Holmes set the ring down with a quiet clink. "Not just out there, Lestrade, watching us." At that moment there was a sharp knock at the door. Holmes raised a brow. "That will be for me." Mrs. Hudson entered, holding a small black envelope. "This was just delivered, Mr. Holmes. No return address." Holmes took it carefully, examining the wax seal. The same serpent insignia was pressed into the black wax. Without hesitation, he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His eyes scanned the contents. For the first time since the case began, I saw something rare flicker across his face. Surprise. "What is it, Holmes?" I pressed. Wordlessly, he handed me the letter. "Mr. Holmes, you are exactly where we want you. Your move. A friend." The room fell into silence. Lestrade muttered a curse. "A friend? What kind of game is this?" Holmes tapped the edge of the letter against his palm. "A most dangerous one." I swallowed. "They knew we were coming for Harrington." Holmes nodded. "And they let us have him. They orchestrated this entire affair from the very beginning." Lestrade shook his head. "Then what do we do now?" Holmes exhaled. "We find out who our friend truly is." Holmes moved quickly, gathering his coat. "Watson, Lestrade, we must return to Scotland Yard. Now." Lestrade frowned. "To do what? Harrington's in custody." Holmes smirked. "Exactly, and I very much doubt he'll survive the night." A chill ran through me. "You believe they'll kill him?" Holmes grabbed his hat. "If the Veiled Order tied up loose ends with Sir Alfred and Redford, do you truly believe they will allow Harrington to speak?" Lestrade's face hardened. "Then let's move." Dechew. Hansom cab ride to Scotland Yard was tense. Holmes remained deep in thought, his fingers drumming against his knee. I could see it in his eyes. He was close to something, some final hidden truth that had eluded us all this time. We arrived at Scotland Yard just after midnight. The building was quiet, the corridors dimly lit. Lestrade led us toward the holding cells, his expression grim. As we approached, I felt my stomach tighten. The door to Harrington's cell was open, and inside he was dead. Harrington's body lay slumped against the wall, a thin line of blood trickling from his lips. His eyes were still open, frozen in an expression of shock. There was no sign of a struggle, no wounds, no indication of how he had died. Lestrade cursed. "Damn it! How did they get to him?" Holmes crouched beside the body, his fingers brushing lightly against Harrington's throat. A moment later, he sighed. Cyanide, fast-acting, no pain. I frowned. Suicide? Holmes shook his head. No, executed. Lestrade ran a hand through his hair. That's it then. He took the fall, and now he's gone. Case closed. Holmes exhaled. No, Lestrade, the case is far from closed. I hesitated. What do you mean? Holmes stood, his expression unreadable. Harrington was silenced because he knew something we have yet to uncover. Lestrade frowned. Like what? Holmes's gaze darkened, like the true identity of the mastermind behind the veiled order. I felt my pulse quicken. Then where do we look? Holmes turned to face us, his eyes gleaming with something cold. We look at the one place we have not yet dared to search. Lestrade stiffened. And where's that? Holmes smirked. The halls of power. As we left Scotland Yard, the weight of the mystery pressed upon me like never before. We had uncovered a vast conspiracy, yet we were still only at the surface. The mastermind remained hidden. The game was still being played. I turned to Holmes. Do you think we can win this? Holmes gave a rare, solemn nod. Watson, we have no choice but to try. And with that, we vanished into the London night, toward the final confrontation that would decide everything. Chapter 10. The London night swallowed us as we left Scotland Yard, the air thick with the weight of an unfinished mystery. Harrington was dead. The veiled order had played us masterfully, allowing us to chase the wrong enemy while their true leader remained hidden in plain sight. Holmes walked ahead with purpose, his coat billowing behind him. His silence was different now, not contemplation, but certainty. I knew that whatever was about to happen, Holmes had already seen the ending. Lestrade, still shaken from Harrington's sudden demise, shook his head. Holmes, where in the devil are we going? Holmes did not stop. To face the architect of this entire affair. I frowned. But who? Holmes turned sharply, his voice low. Watson, do you recall what Sir Alfred's letter said? The key is with the serpent. I nodded. Yes, we assumed it referred to the ring. Holmes smirked. That was the deception, Watson. The true key is a person. Lestrade's eyes widened. You mean? Holmes nodded. The serpent is Sir Charles Fitzroy. A chill ran down my spine. Sir Charles Fitzroy, Under-Secretary of the Home Office. A man with direct influence over Scotland Yard. A politician so deeply entrenched in the OI system that he could manipulate the very forces investigating him. Lestrade let out a curse. Fitzroy? But he's a bloody public servant. The man's been in office for years. Holmes's voice was dangerously soft. And what better place for a spider to weave his web than the very heart of government? By the time we arrived at Fitzroy's townhouse in Belgravia, dawn was creeping along the rooftops. A single gas lamp flickered by the front gate, illuminating the polished brass knocker on the door. Holmes did not hesitate. He rapped 3 times, courts. Moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Sir Charles Fitzroy. He was a distinguished man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed moustache and the composed expression of someone who had never once felt fear. He did not look surprised to see us. "Ah," he murmured, his voice smooth as silk. "Mr. Holmes, I was wondering when you might arrive." Holmes smiled. "Sir Charles, how courteous of you to expect us." Fitzroy stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter. "Please, I would hate to be a poor host." We stepped into a lavish sitting room. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the space with an unnatural warmth. Fitzroy poured himself a glass of brandy and settled into a high-backed chair. Holmes did not sit. He remained standing, his gaze fixed upon the man before us. "You knew Harrington would die tonight." Fitzroy's lips curled into a slight smile. "Of course." He took a sip of his drink. "A regrettable necessity." Lestrade stiffened. "You admit it?" Fitzroy chuckled. "Oh, come now, gentlemen. Let us not pretend we are playing a different game." His eyes flicked toward Holmes. "Surely you must appreciate the elegance of it." Holmes's voice was sharp. "Sir Alfred Wetherell threatened to expose you, so you killed him. Henry Redford knew too much, so you killed him. And when Harrington became a liability, you—" Fitzroy waved a hand. "Let us not be so melodramatic, Mr. Holmes. I did not personally kill anyone. But I will say this, loyalty is a precious commodity." I felt a deep sinking dread settle in my stomach. Holmes tilted his head. "And what of me, Sir Charles? You allowed me to uncover this much. Why?" Fitzroy leaned forward, his smile widening. "Because I wanted to see if you could." Holmes's expression did not change, but I could feel the tension thickening between them. Fitzroy swirled his brandy lazily. "You are an interesting man, Mr. Holmes, a mind unlike any other, and that is why I have a proposition for you." I stiffened. "A proposition?" Fitzroy nodded. "Join us." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Holmes chuckled. "I assume you are not offering me a seat in Parliament." Fitzroy's eyes gleamed. "You are wasted on petty cases. The veiled order could use a mind such as yours. Influence beyond measure. Knowledge beyond reach. You would not need to solve mysteries, Mr. Holmes. You would write them." Lestrade's hand instinctively went to his revolver. "You're out of your mind." Fitzroy ignored him. His gaze remained locked on Holmes. "Tell me, detective, what is the point of uncovering the truth if you cannot change the world with it?" Silence. Holmes exhaled. Then, with the faintest trace of amusement, he said, "You are clever, Sir Charles, but you have made one grave miscalculation." Fitzroy's brow arched. "Oh?" Holmes smiled. "You assume that I desire power." Fitzroy's expression faltered. Holmes took a step forward, his voice calm. "You see, Sir Charles, power does not interest me, nor does influence, nor wealth." His gaze darkened. But justice, that is another matter entirely. Fitzroy's smile faded. I see. He set down his glass. A pity. Then a movement. His hand went to his desk, reaching for something. A hidden revolver. But Holmes was faster. Before Fitzroy could raise the gun, Holmes kicked the table forward, knocking the weapon from his grasp. The brandy glass shattered against the rug as Fitzroy lunged for the firearm. Lestrade was on him in an instant, tackling him to the ground. The two struggled, Fitzroy thrashing wildly, but it was over in seconds. Lestrade wrenched his arms behind his back, snapping the handcuffs into place. Sir Charles Fitzroy, you are under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and treason against the A.E. Crown. Fitzroy did not struggle. He only laughed, a slow, hollow chuckle. You think this means anything? He murmured. You think you have won? Holmes crouched beside him. The game is over, Sir Charles. Fitzroy shook his head. No, Mr. Holmes, the game has only just begun. Holmes studied him for a long moment. Then softly he said, Perhaps, but tonight you have lost. Hours later, back at Baker Street, I stared into the dying fire, exhaustion settling over me. Lestrade had left, taking Fitzroy to Scotland Yard. The veiled order had lost its leader, but I could not shake the unease in my chest. I turned to Holmes, who sat in his armchair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Holmes, I murmured, do you think Fitzroy was telling the truth? Holmes did not answer immediately. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing the signet ring. He turned it over once, twice. Then he dropped it into the flames. I watched as the gold melted into the embers. Finally, Holmes spoke. No, Watson. Fitzroy was not the true leader of the veiled order. I inhaled sharply. Then who? Holmes exhaled. That, my dear Watson, is a mystery yet to be solved. And with that, he closed his eyes as the fire burned into the London night. Chapter 2. 11. The quiet of Baker Street was a stark contrast to the storm that had just passed. The fire had burned low, casting only faint shadows against the walls. Holmes sat unmoving in his chair, his gaze fixed on the darkened window. Sir Charles Fitzroy was in custody. The veiled order had been exposed, and yet the weight of the matter had not lifted. I set down my tea with a quiet clink. Holmes, you have been silent for nearly an hour. Holmes did not look at me. Because, Watson, I am listening. I frowned. Listening to what? Holmes's eyes flickered with something unreadable. To the silence. I let out a slow breath. You believe Fitzroy was right, that the game isn't over. Holmes exhaled. We have removed a piece from the board, Watson, but the hand that moves the pieces remains unseen. I leaned forward. Then who? Holmes's fingers tapped lightly against his armrest. That is the question, is it not? A knock at the door made me start. Mrs. Hudson entered, holding a small envelope. This just arrived, Mr. Holmes. No return address. Holmes took it carefully, examining the seal. The wax was red, the stamp unmarked. Without a word, he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His expression did not change as his eyes moved over the words. What does it say? I asked. Holmes handed it to me. Mr. Holmes, you played your role well, but this was never your game. The true king is yet to fall." A ghosted chill ran through me. "A ghost?" Holmes exhaled, setting the letter on the table. A most peculiar moniker. Lestrade arrived moments later, still smelling of damp rain from the streets. "Holmes," he said, shaking his head, "Scotland Yard has Fitzroy in the deepest cell we have, but the man won't stop smiling." Holmes looked up. "Smiling?" Lestrade nodded grimly. "Like he knows something we don't." Holmes stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. "Because he does." It was well past midnight when we arrived at Scotland Yard. The cells were eerily quiet, save for the occasional drip of water echoing in the halls. Lestrade led us to Fitzroy's cell. The man sat calmly on his cot, his fingers laced together, his posture relaxed. When he saw Holmes, his smile widened. "Mr. Holmes," he murmured, "come to gloat." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "You were never the leader, were you?" Fitzroy chuckled. "Oh, Holmes, do you really believe I would tell you if I were?" Holmes exhaled. "You are merely a servant to something greater. A lieutenant, a mouthpiece." Fitzroy's smile did not falter. "Perhaps." Holmes's voice lowered. "Who is the ghost?" Fitzroy tilted his head. "A whisper. A shadow. Someone who has been watching you for far longer than you know." Lestrade scoffed. "Enough of the riddles." Holmes did not move. "Who is he?" Fitzroy only smiled. Then softly he said, "You've already met him." A cold sensation ran down my spine. Holmes's voice was dangerously low. "Who?" Fitzroy leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "The man who gave you the case." "Silence!" I inhaled sharply. "You don't mean—" Fitzroy's smile deepened. "Goodbye, Mr. Holmes." Holmes turned abruptly. "We're leaving." Lestrade frowned. "But—" Holmes's coat billowed as he strode toward the exit. "Now, Lestrade." We were back in Baker Street within the hour. Holmes wasted no time. He moved swiftly to his desk, rifling through papers, notes, letters, until, finally, he found it, the original case file. He held it up, his eyes scanning the top page, the signature of the man who had first brought the matter to Scotland Yard. Gent Edwin Hargrove. My breath caught. "Holmes! That's—" Holmes closed his eyes briefly, then exhaled. "Yes, Watson, the true mastermind." Lestrade paled. "The Commissioner of Scotland Yard." Holmes set the paper down gently. The ghost. The implications were staggering. Hargrove had set this entire case into motion. He had led us down the path, ensured we uncovered Fitzroy, so that the real leader would remain untouched. I felt sick. "Holmes, what do we do?" Holmes stood slowly, walking to the window. He looked out into the fog-shrouded streets. Then, softly, he said, "We wait." Lestrade frowned. "Wait for what?" Holmes's fingers tapped against the glass. "For him to make his next move," I swallowed. "And if he does—" Holmes turned to face me. "Then, Watson, we end the game." And with that, the fire burned low, and the night stretched long, while somewhere in the city a shadow watched and waited. Chapter 12. The gaslights flickered dimly against the damp London streets, casting long, shifting shadows. The city unaware of the silent war that had been waged within its highest offices, carried on as though nothing had changed. But I knew better. Something had changed. Holmes sat by the fire, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes closed in thought. The name Lord Edwin Hargrove lingered between us like the final piece of a puzzle that had been in front of us all along. The Commissioner of Scotland Yard, the very man who had first brought us the case, the man who had let us chase the wrong enemy while he remained in the shadows, watching, waiting. We had uncovered Sir Charles Fitzroy, but he had only been a lieutenant, a sacrifice. The true leader of the Veiled Order had been guiding us the entire time, allowing us to move as he pleased, ensuring that when we reached the end, we would find nothing. I exhaled, the weight of it all pressing on my chest. "Holmes," I said at last, my voice hoarse. "What do we do?" Holmes opened his eyes. He reached for the letter, the final warning from a ghost, and turned it over between his fingers. Then, softly, he said, "We let him believe he has won." The next evening, as the city slipped into darkness, we arrived at Scotland Yard. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked stone, the streets eerily quiet. Lestrade walked beside us, his face tense. "You're sure about this, Holmes?" Holmes adjusted his gloves. "Quite." Lestrade muttered something under his breath, but said no more. When we entered the Commissioner's office, Lord Edwin Hargrove was already waiting for us. He sat behind his vast mahogany desk, an air of quiet authority surrounding him. His silver hair was neatly combed, his sharp blue eyes giving nothing away. He did not look surprised to see us. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, Inspector Lestrade." His voice was calm, composed. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Holmes smiled faintly. "I believe you already know." Hargrove leaned back in his chair. "Indulge me." Holmes stepped forward. "Sir Charles Fitzroy is in custody." Hargrove nodded. "So I heard. A remarkable achievement." Holmes studied him, "And yet you knew from the beginning that he was never the true leader of the Veiled Order." A beat of silence. Hargrove's expression remained neutral. "A bold accusation, Mr. Holmes." Holmes exhaled. "You played your role masterfully, Lord Hargrove, presenting the case to me personally, ensuring that my attention remained fixed on Fitzroy while you remained untouched. Even now, as we stand before you, there is no evidence that ties you directly to the crimes committed." Hargrove smiled. "Then I suggest, Mr. Holmes, that you tread carefully." Lestrade clenched his fists. "You're a murderer." Hargrove's smile did not waver. "That is quite the claim, Inspector." Holmes remained still. "Fitzroy called you the ghost. And that is what you are, isn't it? The unseen force pulling the strings, orchestrating everything from behind the veil." Hargrove regarded Holmes for a long moment. Then slowly he stood. "I must say, Holmes," he murmured, walking to the window, "I was uncertain whether you would reach the truth in time. But now that you have, I find myself rather impressed." He turned to face us, hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me, Mr. Holmes, what do you intend to do now?" The air in the room tightened. Holmes smiled. "Nothing." Lestrade and I both turned to him in shock. "Nothing?" I echoed. Holmes nodded, You see, Lord Hargrove, you were careful. You ensured that there was no evidence, no paper trail, no confession, nothing to link you directly to the veiled order. Hargrove's gaze sharpened. Holmes continued, his tone quiet. But power, Lord Hargrove, is built upon trust, and if there is one thing you cannot afford, it is doubt. He stepped forward, voice lowering. You may have removed Fitzroy from the board, but the moment your own people begin to question whether you have been compromised, your power will collapse from within. Hargrove's jaw tightened. Holmes tilted his head. So I will do nothing, except watch as the foundation of your empire crumbles beneath you. Hargrove remained silent for a long moment. Then, softly, he said, I underestimated you. Holmes smirked. Yes, you did. The commissioner exhaled, then returned to his desk. You have no proof, no case. You cannot win. Holmes turned toward the door. We shall see, Lord Hargrove. We shall see. And with that, we left. As we walked out into the night, I could not shake the feeling of something unfinished. I turned to Holmes. That was it. That was your move. Holmes exhaled. Patience, Watson. Lestrade frowned. You're just going to let him walk free. Holmes paused, looking toward the distant glow of the city. Then softly, he said, No, I am going to let him fall. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly the rumors began. A whisper in a corridor, a glance exchanged between officials, a question left unanswered. The men who once followed the veiled order without hesitation began to hesitate. The organization, built upon control and secrecy, now had neither. And then, one morning, a single headline appeared in the papers. Lord Edwin Hargrove resigns as Commissioner of Scotland Yard. Lestrade nearly spilled his tea when he saw it. Bloody hell, Holmes, you actually did it. Holmes, still reading, smirked. Quite. I set the paper down. So, it's over. Holmes exhaled. For now. I studied him. You don't seem convinced. Holmes leaned back in his chair, staring into the fire. Watson, men like Hargrove do not simply disappear. They wait. They adapt. His voice lowered. And when the time is right, they return. A shiver ran down my spine. Holmes picked up the paper once more. Then softly he murmured, I shall be waiting. And with that, the case of the veiled order came to its quiet, unsettling close, while, somewhere in the darkness, the ghost watched and waited.